Okay, continuing where I left off, I'm now discussing the Canaanites, and I am discussing specifically their religious practices. I just finished discussing the religious practice of child sacrifice, and made the point that in ancient Near Eastern culture, the child sacrifice was a rarity and and for the most part, it looks like it was exclusively practiced by the Canaanites and the Amorites. The very people that Israel was trying to remove from the land of Canaan in the books of Deuteronomy and Joshua. Now, a few more religious practices I want to discuss here real quick. It appears that the Canaanites practiced incest. Incest was likewise not an acceptable ancient Near Eastern practice. For example, the famous laws of Hammurabi contain several sections on this issue, as do the Hittite law codes. This is, of course, according to the law collections from the Mesopotamian and Asian Minor, 1995. The only external data about Canaanite practice we do have here, and you can imagine how difficult it would be to leave archaeological traces of this around, comes from the religious myths and role models of their gods. It must be remembered that the religious rituals of the ancient cultures are generally reenactments of the divine activities. For example, when a religious myth would have one god impregnating another god producing spring, the human worshippers would reenact this with cultic prostitutes or cultic prostitution. For example, in the Ugaritic corpus, which is exclusively Canaanite, there's a story of the incestuous god El. According to Nelson's Illustrated Encyclopedia of Biblical Facts, the second myth is often called the birth of the good and gracious God. It opens with a banquet at which wine flows freely. The text is divided into two sections, the 10th being the last and most crucial. El is about to create two women who will become either his wives or daughters, depending on his ability to impregnate them. He creates these females and seduces them, and they both become pregnant. One bears a child called Dawn and the other child called Dusk. El makes love to these same women, and they produce 7 sons between them, and these sons are the good and gracious gods, and they are destined to be gods of fertility, and are first suckled at the breast of the lady Asher, wife of El. So, with such deities to emulate it, there's little wonder that God described the Canaanite practice as being very, very real. The third practice that was apparently involved, the Canaanites were involved with, was bestiality. We have the same situation as the situation with incest. It is forbidden in the ancient law codes, the code of Hammurabi or the ancient Hittite law codes. Again, according to the law collections from Mesopotamia, 1995. But bestiality shows up in Canaanite mythology, with Baal as the role model of this time. Baal is usually depicted in human form and is often accompanied by a bull or rides upon a bull. He is sometimes pictured as a bull as well, but there is in drawings and not in literary text. In one text, Baal, on his way to the underworld, has sexual relations with a young heifer, according to Nelson's Illustrated Encyclopedia of Biblical Facts. Baal complies. He desires a calf cow, and Duber, a heifer field, lies with her times 77 times 88. So their gods depicted bestiality, so it would be a little stretch to say that they also practice bestiality in their religious practices. And there's the homosexual practices. This appears to be an issue unique to Israel. Homosexual practices were generally not outlawed in ancient Near Eastern culture, and certainly were tolerated in the ancient Near East in private life, again according to Mesopotamian writing and reasoning. And it was also part of the cultic practice, which we're going to describe here. But Israel's God condemned this behavior in every culture in which it is mentioned in the ancient Near East, whether it be Sodom, Canaanite, and Egypt, Leviticus 18:3, the Israelite culture, Leviticus 18, chapter 18 and 20, in the Roman culture, Romans chapter 1, the Hellenistic culture, 1 Timothy chapter 1, and the Greek culture, 1 Corinthians chapter 6. I've always found the claim that Judeo-Christianity's lack of acceptance of homosexuality as a morally legitimate sexual expression was merely a cultural stance not a timeless or transculture, to be a bit weak in light of the above list of cultures. The range of times and cultures included in this list, many of which homosexuality is accepted or as it's okay, would certainly count as a very strong evidence for a moral, universal, transcultural conviction against the practice by Israel alone. What is interesting about this, though, is that all the practices we have in this list, and this one practice is not mentioned in the religious literature. Boitero in the book Mesopotamia, Writings, Reasonings, and Gods, 1992, states, in mythology and theology we do not have the slightest certain example of homosexual relations between gods. So the only data we have for that is in the biblical text itself. The last religious practice that's mentioned is that of cultic prostitution, and that would cultic prostitution by both male and female. The use of male and female prostitutes is also attested to and sanctioned to some extent throughout the ancient Near East, and clearly so in the Canaanite sanctuaries. According to Nelson's Illustrated Encyclopedia of the Bible and the Canaanite text use the words Gandesh and Gadesh, which mean Holy One, the first masculine, the second feminine. At these religious sites, these holy ones were homosexual priests and priestesses who acted as prostitutes. We find strong Hebrew reaction against this cultic prostitution in passages such as Leviticus 19:29 and Deuteronomy 23:17. For example, Leviticus 19 states, "Do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore." Deuteronomy 23 states, "There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor sodomite of the sons of Israel." One of Josiah's reforms was to break down the house of the sodomites. 2 Kings 23:7. What is important for us to note here is that this sacred prostitution was not questioned by surrounding cultures. Remember that in the paradigm cases of annihilation we looked at, the culture was uniform. All the people, save a handful, were proponents or transmitters of the values of that culture. There were no rebels, no dissidents, and no minority voices. There was no such recorded protest in Canaanite, but rather an evangelistic posture in favor of it reached successfully deep into Israel. So, in conclusion, by 1400 BC, the Canaanite civilization and religion had become one of the weakest, most decadent, and most immoral cultures of the civilized world. Many of these repulsive practices are prohibited to Israel in Leviticus 18, and in view of the sexual perversions listed, it is most likely that the venereal diseases ravaged a large part of the population. Hence, stern measures were required to prevent decimation of the Israelites by the spread of these and other diseases such as malaria and smallpox. Contagion would have been possible by sudden fraternization before immunity could develop. So what we have here is we have internal, international, extreme violence, and usually decadent, destructive, and dangerous religious practices by the Canaanites. Okay, so to recap what we've gone over so far, in the last two videos I have been discussing who the Canaanites are, and I've been trying to fit this in or demonstrate that this fits within God's pattern of judgment that we've seen in the Old Testament, a pattern that we recognized in the flood of Noah, in Sodom and Gomorrah, and dealing with the Amalekites. First of all, the pattern that we looked at, the judgments are annihilations, and we've looked at the Bible and demonstrated that the Bible says that this annihilation of the Canaanites was a judgment. Point two, the judgments were for publicly recognized cruelty and violence of extreme and widespread nature, and that's what we're working on right now. We've looked at the Canaanites. We've made a point. We've noted that they were a warlike culture. They were a very violent culture. They were very violent towards other peoples, other nations, and there was a lot of the religious practices included child sacrifice, bestiality, incest, homosexual practices, and cultic prostitution. Now, in the next video, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the Canaanites, and also demonstrate using additional data to demonstrate just how evil these people were, and then we'll move on from there. Thanks.